If you're keeping count, yes, I missed yesterday. I was in an appointment, ended up having a great conversation, took a little longer than we had originally anticipated, but I was focusing on my word of the year, B. That is whatever it is at that moment. In that moment, it was being in the conversation. It was being in the conversation with the person and focusing on how I could interact with the people right in front of me. But I'm here today, excited to be sharing with you, kind of start with this topic that I discussed earlier this week in the Awaken the Leader Within workshop that I held. And I talked about the 5 R's of mindset. And one of them is routine. And I ask you, what do you do? Do you have a routine? I learned many, many years ago from the wise Peter Drucker, this is before I really read much of his work, that if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. Well, reading right now, one of the books I'm reading here, the first part of this year is The Effective Executive, going through that. And we're in the process of really analyzing, how do you think you spend your time, and quantifying, how do you actually spend your time. I did this many years ago when I was working in an office where I was doing a lot of telephone calls and interacting with people. And throughout the day, I logged 65 different phone calls. Now, some of them were of varying degree. It was catching up. It was checking on an order. It was interacting with salespeople. It was interacting with clients. But throughout that day, 65 calls. And I've always kept that in mind. And one, the amount of turnover and change. And I ask you this, if you were to keep a log, an actual log, calendar, but if you write down every minute of your day, how do you spend it? What do you do? If your phone was able to track and it spit you out a report, hey, this is what you did today. Would it be what you expect? Would you be blown away and surprised? There's reports that you can get from your phone that tells you usage, how many times an hour you pick it up. My encouragement is, if you aren't familiar with those, look at that and get a surprise of how many hours a day you spend on different applications. And then from there, how do you spend the rest of your day? Who do you talk to? Who do you interact with? How do you spend your day? If you don't manage it, it's really hard to measure. Excuse me. If you don't measure it, it's really hard to manage. All right. The next thing I want to share with you here is this. My thought of the day: revenge is an act of devious pleasure. Now, I read about this in another book that I'm reading, The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. He talks about the Song Dynasty. And in it, he makes this kind of reference. I talked a little bit about the idea that enemies are actually more trusting than friends. And he talks about this is that people, from a gratitude point of view, it's a burden. Oh, I owe you something. That's a gratitude piece. That's a burden. Yet revenge can be a pleasure. It's a devious pleasure. So instead, see the opportunity to use gratitude as a weapon. My friend Brian has shared, when we use gratitude as a weapon, not only are we flipping the script here, man, we make those around us burn. But at the same point, we change our heart and are thankful for the opportunities we've gone through. See, revenge is an act of devious pleasure. We can change gratitude to be just as offensive, just as on guard, by using it as a weapon. Hope you got value from that today.